All right. All right, let's kind of wrap up this discussion and come together. So we're talking about what do we do with differences? How can we still be unified? We've talked what is unity, but it can't necessarily just be that we all agree on every single thing, unless, well, maybe we'll see. Maybe that's your answer. Okay, so let's start. We'll start here in the middle. That smaller table here. What did you all talk about for how we still be unified when we have differences of opinion?
Sorry.
Didn't know that was the question. Okay.
We apologize.
That's all right. Okay, well, we'll move over here if you want to think about it. All right, back here.
Well, we said that there's several things. I mean, you need to talk, you need to go to the scripture, there needs to be some negotiation, some give and take.
Okay, so give and take, yeah, go to scripture. A lot of times that may be what we're have a difference of opinion on, but still where we want to kind of focus that discussion. Okay, give and take though, discussion. All right, over here.
Well, we kind of talked about as husband and wives, when you have differences of opinion, you normally say, well, what's best for the kids? And I guess thinking of us in the church, it may be, okay, we have differences, but what's best for the family, the church.
Okay, that's really good. You didn't hear he's talking about like in a marriage, you got to think about, well, what's good for the whole family, what's good for the kids, and so in the same way, let's think about what's good for the whole church. Okay. Great. Over here, this table. They were going to say that. This table here on the left. What did you all talk about?
I don't think we discussed
Okay, just share donuts and things that you like, and so those other differences go away, right? I mean, there's this. I'm joking, but you find the common things that we enjoy that matter to us, whether it's donuts or more serious things. Let's focus on that, and some of these differences don't matter. Oh, battery's dying. I'm going to use my preacher voice. All right, back here. What did you talk about?
If you have a community where you genuinely care about each other and everyone is practicing seeing the value in other people, then we want everyone to have the things that are really important to them met. And so when those kinds of issues come up, looking at how important is this to you, how much does it affect you, and how strongly do you feel about it. So if the reality is I really disagree with somebody else, but I know that it's much more important to them, or again, it affects the whole group in a bigger way than it affects me, then we need to be able to individually kind of take a step back on things, even if we don't agree with every single thing, because we see the value that every member of the community has. And so we're willing to step aside if something is much more important, or someone knows a lot more about something than we do, or it affects other people more than it affects us.
Okay, so consider who it affects, how much it matters to someone else. Sometimes we may both care passionately about the same thing in different ways, but yeah, to be willing to say, this matters to you, and so I really need to hear you out and not just go with what I think. One rule that I heard once was an 80-20 rule, where you should only be at max comfortable 80% of the time, and 20% you're a little uncomfortable for the sake of other people, because a lot of times there may be some who are very uncomfortable with a lot of things. And so there's a little bit of give and take, and you work out the percentage how best you can. I know one of the things that we talked about in some discussions last week, I know Anna Jane and John were talking about this kind of well-known phrase that we don't even know who originally said it because it's been around so much, that in essentials, unity, in non-essentials, liberty, and in all things, charity. So when it's the things that matter the most, then that's where we do need to have unity and come together. All right, we're working on it. Okay, don't want to be too loud. But when it's things that are not essential, that we recognize there's freedom. There are going to be differences of opinion, and that's okay, although we still have to figure out a way forward. But in all things, there is charity, there's love. When I think about that quote, a lot of times what we disagree on is, well, what's essential, right? And so, but again, through these discussions, charity and love have to guide the discussion. That comes first. We talked about in 1 Corinthians, the letter that we're looking at, how Paul is trying to draw them back to the essentials of things like the cross and the resurrection and love, right? So in chapter 2, he says, when I was among you, I was determined to know nothing, I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And not just the fact that Jesus died, but the way of the cross, this mindset of giving yourself, of self-giving love. And that's the famous chapter 13, where he describes what that love does or what that love doesn't do, and how that is the mind of Christ. And so that's all the way through this. Or I think of something like Galatians 5:6, where Paul says the only thing that counts is faith expressed through love. Right? That's the essential. Everything else we're kind of working out. But if we don't have that, then what are we even doing here? And so we're continuing today to think about these differences versus division, and how we define those sort of things, and how we do work together and find unity. And again, we can look at plenty of stories of the early church, the ministry of Jesus, and see the way that it's hard to know who's with us and who's not, and how do we work together. I think of a story in Mark chapter 9 where the disciples see there's this other guy who is casting out demons in Jesus' name. And they're like, well, Jesus, we got to stop him because he's not with us, right? And Jesus says, whoever is not against us is for us. Right? This was a case where somebody was blessing people, casting these demons out, giving them new life, restoring them to community. And these disciples thought, well, we can't have that because he's not doing it the way we would do it. He's not doing it with us. And so if we see that someone is blessing somebody, maybe not the way we would do it, maybe we need to not be careful. We need to be careful about judging them or trying to stop them and shut it down if it's really blessing and giving life. The other example we talked about last week was Paul and Barnabas, right? They had gone on this missionary journey together and blessed a lot of people, formed these churches, but there came a point where they were in disagreement over what to do with John Mark. And so they split up and went on two different mission journeys. And we talk about that as separation rather than division. But to think about, what if that had gone differently? What if after Paul went to these churches, Barnabas came along behind Paul and corrected everything that Paul had taught, and telling everybody that Paul had been with, like, no, you don't want to listen to Paul. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know the gospel. Let me tell you the real gospel. Right? That, I think, we could easily label as division, that Barnabas would have been being divisive in that case. And in fact, there were some who basically did that. Christian Pharisees who came on after Paul to correct his teaching, right? The book of Galatians is really all about that, because you had these other Christians coming and saying, well, you're not circumcised, so you're not really in yet. And you see there, Paul is not saying, well, okay, let's just have a difference of opinion. No, he gets pretty heated because he sees how divisive this other group is being. And what they're doing is they're binding these other kind of burdensome commands on others. And so I think we can see a difference there, right? And a difference of opinion versus actually working in a divisive way, right? Division is often, it's working against, not just working separately. And so, well, where does this come from, right? We usually don't just wake up and decide, you know what, I think we need to split everything up. One of the ways that Paul often talks about the start of all this is complaining and grumbling, right? A very common thing, but it can be a very toxic thing as well. So in 1 Corinthians, go to chapter 10, and he talks about this. And this is a place we're going to get into this specific issue later, where they're debating about food sacrificed to idols, and it's really about, where do my rights stop for the sake of someone else? But he's using the story of the Israelites in the wilderness as kind of the classic example of this, right? That Moses is trying to lead them, and they keep murmuring and grumbling and complaining against him. And so he says in 10:10, do not complain as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer, right? Complaints like this can be self-destructive. You're kind of making things harder on yourself when you're doing this. Or in Philippians 2:14, he says something similar. He knows the church where he's pretty positive with them, but he knows even there's a little bit of a difference of opinion or arguing. So he says, Philippians 2:14, do all things without murmuring or arguing. Right? Maybe you're different translations of complaining or grumbling, those sort of things. It's all kind of the same what he's talking about here. So what I want you all to talk about for a minute. So what's the difference between grumbling and raising legitimate concerns? Right? Something Gary kind of talked about this morning. There are things that we can be legitimately concerned about, and we don't want to ignore those or pretend that there's no problems here. But what's the difference? What's the difference in grumbling and complaining like Paul is talking about, and when are we actually legitimately concerned about other people in the church? So take a few minutes and talk about that, and we'll come back together.
It seems to me the biggest difference is who you're doing the talking to. Like, it's grumbling if it's with people who think the same way.
I was trying to leave.
Well, I was hoping you'd go that way. And I go, well, we don't have time for our part. I don't know. Like, it's a complaint, a legitimate concern. If you go to the person that can do something, it doesn't. I see what's the and I didn't get started and I tell you about if it's a concern,
Gotta see what how specific you gotta get. I think to me the main thing is here's why we're not just
yeah, like, are you wanting to here's what I'm taking. And it's not it's just not something
so you rush into that.
and I kind of feel like I think
You can tell you where I was the meeting stuff and just kind of say, we plan, right? How much?
well, I think but did not promote getting to the bottom and scary about it. That's right. It's not doing something for the betterment.
You are Sunday morning. Small no
What is that? Is that
everybody, which is
was there fruits of the spirit?
All right, let's take one more minute. Hate to break up the good conversation, but we'll wrap some things up here.
if you have legitimate concern and talk about it, and if you are offering a solution to, not just, I'm going to complain, working towards actually solving the problem. As you see, sometimes it's not. Yeah. That's sometimes like number one, is to just say, who's the solution going to be best for us? Yes.
All right, let's see if we can find out what everybody's been talking about here a little bit. If we can get the short answer from each table, what would you describe as the difference between grumbling and having those legitimate concerns that need to be brought up? Okay, let's see, what tables did we do? Okay, you guys here at this table, I think that we did. What's the short answer? Bella, are you the spokesman?
I guess I will be.
Okay.
we all kind of talked about like grumbling is more like you're not going to come up with a solution. You're just going to sit there and talk, and it's almost like satisfaction for yourself because you're upset about something. And then we kind of talked about like raising concern is like we have this concern, like what's our solution, or can we talk to try to come up with something together?
Okay.
And Susan did a great job comparing it from like school life and politics and that type of thing with church, and how you might do a better job than me, but like how in tenure, like schools, like some teachers have tenure, so they have like that protection where they can kind of, if they voice or if they say something that's incorrect or impolite, like they're kind of protected. And then like same with church sometimes, like if somebody does say something or do something, you know, most of the time, like we're going to talk it out, or like they're going to be protected because, I mean, we're all together, like we really, unless it becomes a huge concern, we can't really ask somebody to leave, I guess. Is that kind of, Susan, can you elaborate?
I'll just put it in terms of privilege. Like, teachers feel privileged to gripe and complain because they're somewhat protected from being fired. Which you would not do in the business world. You lack that privilege, right? Of tenure. But I think in church members feel privileged to gripe.
Okay. All right. So grumbling, the short answer, grumbling is more for yourself and is self-satisfaction. Concerns, bringing up concerns is what do we do about this and what differences can be done? Okay. Short answer here at this table.
Well, we just said grumbling can oftentimes just be talking to people who feel the same way that you do.
Okay.
And a complaint would be going to someone that can actually do something about it.
Okay. Grumbling amongst yourselves versus trying to actually go to do something to take care of it.
And we also said those things that they said at the other table.
Okay. Wes?
With the fruits of the Spirit.
With
the fruit of the Spirit. Very good. Okay, short answer over here.
We like to balance.
Okay, balance.
We said grumbling is hot stirs.
Okay.
Legitimate concerns is more concern because.
Okay.
Respectful clarification. And maybe.
Concern because.
Other solutions.
Okay, possible solutions with concerns. Very, very, very good. Okay, short answer?
We talked about a lot of the same, like being solution oriented versus I don't like what somebody else is doing, but I don't want to fix the problem. We also talked about like being able to identify, like, is this something that you just don't like or something that's actively harming someone? If you can't identify who's being harmed by it, it's probably not really a real concern. If you're just complaining because you don't like it, but no one is being hurt, that's probably an area where we need to kind of be a little less selfish and just, this is what the group is doing, okay? Versus saying, because I'm already involved in this, I can see who's being hurt, and so I want to come in and see how I could help bridge that gap and mitigate the harm that might be caused by this decision that we've made or this thing that we're doing, as opposed to just, I don't like it, you fix it.
Okay. Involving yourself in the solution itself is moving toward it. It's very good. Okay, short answer over here.
Amen from the first table, and sometimes the difference is just a matter of perception.
Perception. Well, that's a good word. Okay. All right. Well, what we're trying to look at is noticing with the Corinthians as well as Paul's writings that he is not trying to get rid of these concerns, legitimate concerns, but he is trying to get rid of this seed of grumbling that begins to move into a different level of actually working against, right? Because Paul had plenty of people that worked against him, and yet he still, as a matter of fact, this letter he's writing to the Corinthians, not everybody is for Paul, right? And so he's writing to some people that have really actually said they don't agree with Paul. They think that Apollos is much better to follow than Paul. And so when you get into a situation where we're talking about any kind of leadership and so forth, you begin to have these grumblings and you begin to have these legitimate concerns come up and figure out, okay, how do we work with those? And what we thought we would do is, because we are 3 months removed from the first of the year, is just pause and think about, okay, we're trying to do this class, okay, so that we can talk through this together. And I like the way that Kelly said that, is that we're trying to work this together and hear what other people are thinking about and saying, because through the Westlink history, before I got here, and especially when I've been here all this time, there has been cases of separation, and there has been cases of trying to have division. Okay? And so we've been through a lot in the last couple of years, for sure. And so we come and say, okay, has there been separation? Has there been division? No. And as we look back in Westlink history, there have been those that have grumbled, and what we usually find out is that it moves to an against. Okay, it can move to I just don't like the way it's going, but then it moves into some kind of doctrinal idea or doctrinal stance and say, no, this has to be this way. Okay? And in the past, through the years, man, I can't tell you the number of times that the shepherds, almost in the Church of Christ, my dad was an elder, 2 different places, and it's almost like the elders are the complaint board, you know, and then through the years, many people would come and say, this is not right, this ought to be changed, this ought to be taken care of, and so sorting through all of that, okay, is, wait a minute, is this just a pleaser thing, a people pleaser thing? Is this a thing that is a real matter of issues that need to be legitimate concerns, you know? So that's been a really, really big challenge, and a lot of weight has been put on elders that Paul doesn't seem to put on elders. Okay? And that as he writes to the Corinthian church, he says, work this out to the church. So that's why we're doing this in a class way, right? And it's even come up through the years. And so what we've seen is, I like what one of the older members said to me not too long ago was, well, in the churches of Christ, they didn't grow up in the Church of Christ, but they said, in the Church of Christ, isn't this the way it works? If you don't like what's going on, you leave. You know? Well, yeah, pretty much. That's the way it's kind of worked. Okay? And so is that a separation? Usually it is a separation. The Westlink mission and vision has not changed, as far as I can tell, any time I've been here. And about 20-something years ago, I took into the elders, I said, I don't know if I'm in line with the Church of Christ anymore. Okay? And I just handed them a paper and I said, here's at least 20 things that as I grew up, I don't think that these are right. Okay? And they all, at that time, all the shepherds over there said, totally agree with you. And so we said things like, we will never preach, we will never ask you to preach, and we will never expect you to preach that some other peoples are going to be lost. That churches of Christ are the only ones. We'll never preach about instrumental music as if that is a requirement in the scriptures and stuff. So we went through all of those different kinds of things. Right? And so in that, though, out of that very setting, one of the elders began to say, no, we're getting way off. We're getting way off of what? Way off of Jesus, or way off of the Church of Christ doctrines? And they began to say, well, we're getting off of the Church of Christ doctrines. And they left. Okay? And this is years ago. Okay? And they left. And what I just found out 2 weeks ago, is that same person is still recruiting people to leave Westlink. Okay? They're still working to try to get people to get away from this godforsaken, awful, terrible church. Okay? So a separation seems to have turned into a division. Okay? And so that's what we're talking about, is that that we don't want to see that kind of thing happen. And so therefore the grumbling against the leadership, somehow the leadership loses trust and faith in the leadership. And that's possible because through the years, I remember a very, very unique time. I think this was even before Russell was one of the shepherds, that a group came in and said, "Fire him now." And the shepherds talked to him about what exactly are you talking about. And one of the guys brought in a little book that he had been saving and keeping track of all the things that I did not preach that were Church of Christ doctrine. And he said, he needs to be fired now. And the elders at that time said, well, we had a discussion with him and we are on track with these kind of things. And so we don't understand where this is coming from. We'd like to go through this and so forth. And that group left. Okay? And so through the years, it's been a real challenge to say, okay, well, and every time those kind of things happen, and what has happened in the last 2.5 years, I say, am I causing division? You know, am I, you know, I feel like Paul when he writes to these Corinthians, you know, he says all these kind of things. And then we came up to a very, very unique time, okay, and a great, wonderful, can't tell you the number of people that have just surrounded me and support with love and support. But at the same time, there's been a continued flow of kind of grumbling and kind of that kind of thing, you know. But we came to a very unique time when we have, what do? We have a shepherd and some ministers. And so when we go back and look in the last 2.5 years, the shepherds at that time, okay, a lot of people have said, well, obviously the key is when a certain minister came on board, right? And if we go back, let's see, that would be, Chris. Okay? And so it was all fine until everything started kind of coming. And so a lot of people have said, well, it must be something. And all we're saying is that somehow the connection gets to be with the voices, doesn't it? Okay? And so we came to a very unique time, and all the shepherds at that time, some of our shepherds went down to listen to him preach there. We talked to him thoroughly, listened to all of the different things of his ideas and his beliefs and all the different things, and said, are these in line with what Westlink has always tried to be? And that is, we have tried to introduce people to Jesus through a loving, Christlike community. And we have tried to continue to grow in the maturity of Christ in that Christlike loving community. And he was directly on line with that. And we were extremely impressed with some of the scholarship that he had and all of those different kinds of things. And so the elders, I think, even after he came and talked to us a little bit, talked to other people, as we usually do, and everybody's like, yeah, you know. And then certain things happen. You have different issues that come up. You have different things that are tried to study through and so forth. And we move into these kind of situations here that we all of a sudden we go, okay, what is happening here? And so what it seems like Paul is dealing with the Corinthians, and what we're trying to talk about now is, okay, let's move into whatever we need to do. I really like what Elvin said a few weeks ago when he said, well, Paul's writing here. He's not telling them to go get elders. He's telling them to deal with what they have. Okay? And so when we came up with, okay, what is Russell supposed to do? Is he supposed to immediately just step aside and say no? Or is he say, no, wait, I've been a shepherd. People have asked me to shepherd this. And if we go through another shepherd process, somebody's even brought that up, when are we going to go through another shepherd process? Well, we're looking at this to say, what exactly does that look like? Because the last shepherd process kind of got pushed through. And the reality of it is, we got to come back and say, well, let's get on the same page, because in that shepherd process, we did it like we usually do and say, let's people submit names. And we would take the most names. If you just had your name submitted once, we didn't go that. We said, okay, that's just one person. That's great. Somebody sees them as a leader, and everybody ought to be seen as a leader to somebody. But if a lot of people turned in the same name, we went and talked to them. Well, it happens to be that the two that received the most names turned in was me and a woman. And so it just so happens at this time, we went and talked and said, your name has been presented, and the woman that's name was turned in, quite as a matter of fact, more than anyone else. Went and talked to them, and they said, well, I don't think that would probably be the best move for exactly right now. For right now. And then rumors go out, well, they're just trying to get women elders in there. They're trying to become a community church. Whatever all these kind of things mean. But underneath that, is it not a sense of, I don't know if we can trust this leadership? Okay. And so thankfully, Russell has stepped to the plate, and there's been an outpouring of support and love and volunteer things have happened in the last 3 months of people just stepping to the plate and saying, we're going to keep trucking on. What the challenge is, how can we make sure that we're saying there's still separation, there will always be separation, that's going to be a reality for all of us forever. But when does it move to division? How can we help not if people will continue to leave, but can we hold to the mission that we've had? Can we hold to the vision that was always that's here when I got here? Okay. And that has continued on. And so right now, there's trying not to be a whole lot of decisions being made about stuff. Just some things come up. And so Russell has recruited Chris Kolar as our treasurer on the 501, and Wes is the vice president. Okay. And so that aspect of it is the financial, if you will, the building aspect, all that kind of stuff. And we're trying to work together as the three ministers with Russell and with other voices. And so now we're saying, okay, that's why this class came up, is to say, okay, how do we work through this together, recognizing we have some big variances in what this could look like and possibly will look like in the future. But how can we work that together? How can we hang in there together? And present the legitimate concerns and talk through the legitimate concerns and continue to be a blessing to each other as we work through that, and to keep the vision going and the mission, that people can come here and be loved and accepted and blessed. All people. And that sometimes people just are not a part of that. Okay? And that we can let them go. And every time, I remember sitting in Bob Hansen's house, and a big group of people had decided to leave. And we just cried. We cried for a while. Because I thought through these years that we were trying to build that community of family and love. And people just leave. And I get it. Because not everybody is in on the same thing. But it's always tough. And so let's don't let the toughness and the sadness detour us. It didn't then. Strong leadership that said, we're on track. We're so sorry. We're so sorry. But not everybody is going to be on track. And so what we want is everybody to come together here, and especially inside of here, not be grumbling and not complaining and not doing that without, and the rumors and all those kind of things, but that we can work together and share whatever kind of things with each other and keep the working through. So that's why we kind of paused in the middle of this class. It's a little transparency, because we just had somebody else this past week that said, I don't think I can stay at Westlink. And one of the things they said was, we just don't feel like it's transparent. It's what's going on. And so I don't know how to be more transparent, but please tell me if I'm not, or if we're not, or if Russell's not, or if any of the ministers are not, or what we're trying to do here is bring this all together in a way that the mission and the vision can continue to go. And so we will continue to work at that. And please, please don't hesitate to talk to any of us. Please, please continue to pray heavily. Okay? The great blessings, as we said, daily bread, God has blessed us so richly here. You know, I mean, over the 2 years, if we just go financially, it's about $28,000 that we had to take out of our savings, and the van was sold for $28,000. See, it doesn't have to come from just people putting in money in the plate. God's blessings come from all kinds of different places. And so we want his hand of blessing on us. And we don't want to get off track. We're not minimizing all the scriptures of the Bible. We want to stay on track with all that is there. But bring it together into the needs of now. So that is my, how well did I stay on script at all?
That was good.
Okay. So Chris is going to lead us in prayers as we conclude. We do have another thing to reach out to people that Troy Evans family, if you can help me with drinks or cleanup tomorrow, please let me know that. All right. Close us out.
Well, we always talk about like an action point, something to discuss, but really this week, we do just want you to pray. Pray for unity, for Westlink, pray for wisdom going forward. We all need it, and we're all in this together. So let's close with prayer. God, we thank you for all of your blessings, the daily bread that we receive from you in so many ways. And we thank you for this church. We heard from Gary, and I know we've all experienced the way that church is sometimes difficult. It's not easy to be united and live together with others. But I pray that you give us the wisdom and the courage and the strength and the grace to live with each other, even in the midst of our differences, that we have the same ultimate goal of knowing Christ and being more like him in this world. We thank you for Jesus and offer this prayer in his name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks.